What's going on, guys? I'm Tyler, and in continuing my series of Disney movie reviews, I'm here to let you know that Beauty and the Beast is no perfect movie. But it does come pretty damn close, doesn't it? And as the majority of you know, Beauty and the Beast is about Belle, played by Paige O'Hara, who, for various circumstances, finds herself a prisoner to the Beast, played by Robby Benson. But what she doesn't realize is that this beast was once a prince who had been transformed into a monster as punishment for his selfishness. And in a race against time, he's desperate to learn how to love and how to be loved back. And he sees an opportunity to forge a bond between himself and Belle. And over the course of time, that bond becomes legitimate and genuine. And the only thing that stands in their way is this vain, self absorbed hunter named Gaston, played by Richard White, who is also incredibly desperate to marry Belle. And as creepy as the plot kind of sounds, and as some people have complained that it allegedly promotes Stockholm Syndrome, it really doesn't. If anything, Beauty and the Beast is surprisingly one of the most genuine Disney romances that we've ever seen, and that's because Beauty and the Beast themselves learn things about themselves or about other people that they either never knew before or knew, but were starting to kind of become cynical to those beliefs. Belle herself is a Disney princess who's unique in that she doesn't learn anything by changing her behavior or personality. She learns something by sticking to her own morals. She is just as brave and smart and independent as we remember her to be. And Paige O'Hara beautifully gives a great voiceover performance that really brings out those traits that we love about the character. But what I didn't realize about her until rewatching it today was that she comes very close to being so cynical towards people at so many moments. Because at the beginning of the movie, in her own hometown, the only friend she really has is her father. All the other villagers find her strange just because she loves to read. Gaston, the one man who's desperate to please her, really doesn't care about her. In fact, he wants to marry her and cure her of her love for reading just because she's the most beautiful girl in the village and he's the most good looking guy in the village, and that's really about it. And Belle seems to be the only villager other than her father who really sees through just how vain and selfish she is. And she feels very cynical about the village, but once she becomes prisoner to the beast and he tries even harder, sometimes to the point where he almost uses force on her to please him any way she can, she still stands her ground to him, and you feel proud for her. But once she's all alone, she's completely depressed. She's ready to give up on people. And the Beast is a very cynical character himself because of his transformation, and his fear of failing and staying a monster forever is really what keeps him from forging a good bond with Belle at the beginning. But it's not until he learns to stand up for her, let alone stand up for himself, that she really sees that he does have a compassionate side to her, and that her techniques of standing up and showing off who she really is are actually working. And as a result, she repays the kindness. She tends to his wounds. She thanks him. And after that, as the movie slowly but progressively builds the bond between Belle and the Beast, it felt real. It felt genuine. You felt like these two would do anything for each other, which is nothing I can really say about Gaston in all seriousness. Because as memorable as the side characters are for their designs and likable for all the voice actors, Jerry Orbach as Lumiere, David Ogden Stiers as Cogsworth, Angela Lansbury as Mrs. Potts, they all do great voice work. They all provide a lot of passion and energy to their singing. Richard White as Gaston stands out as another great Disney villain. Because he's practically good at anything physically, the townspeople all instantly praise him, and that's what seems to give him this cocky mentality that he deserves anything he asks for, which includes Belle. And as many people have pointed out, the comparisons between him and the Beast really go to show how men tend to judge themselves and others just based on appearances, and how pointing out the smallest flaws about them as a man is what leads them to become competitive over the smallest and dumbest things. This could have been a two-dimensional villain at best, but Richard White's deep, commanding voice and his singing voice really, at the same time, makes you understand why people find him completely suave. His voice makes him sound very charismatic and tough, and that really suits the character. And speaking of that voice, the singing and the music in this movie are top notch, some of Disney's best. This was the Disney Renaissance movie that for me had the most Broadway musical feel to it, as most of the movies in that era were trying to go for. As I said with Little Mermaid, Howard Ashman and Alan Menken were two incredibly great songwriters for Disney, and as with Mermaid, these are also some of the best songs that Disney has ever made. And I think the reason you feel the Broadway passion to it more is that because there are more Broadway actors in this movie who get to sing as opposed to other Disney films, because Angela Lansbury, Jerry Orbach, David Ogden Stiers, they all have theater experience. Paige O'Hara, I believe, was chosen by Howard Ashman for her Broadway work. And all the effort really goes to show. Out of my favorite songs in particular, Belle is a great opening number that does something a little bit different with opening numbers. It tells us all we need to know about the main character by having people who don't understand her sing about her, so we can piece together what she's really like for ourselves. It's a neat little touch, but it's a subtle touch, and I like that. Gaston is another great villain song where the townspeople also sing about how inaccurate they are about what Gaston is really like as a person. But again, we could piece that together for ourselves, just how vain and selfish he is and how stupid the townspeople are just because they're taken by his charm. And Richard White has this incredibly operatic voice because he is a trained opera singer that he makes Gaston sound really charming as a singer, even though he sings about the most devious and stupidest things you could imagine. And of course, Be Our Guest is the big number. It has everything we want in a Broadway musical number: great music, great singing, and great choreography. They come up with so many creative ways to have all these inanimate objects dance and sing and come up with so many creative visuals that live action movies just can't accomplish. They can try, but they won't accomplish it. And it goes without saying how great the animation is. I did a little bit of research to see what kind of new technology they were coming up with, because the year before this with Rescuers Down Under, they had this new editing software where you could accomplish the traditional celluloid hand-painted technique without having to use celluloid, with having to do everything in a computer, all the colors, all the camera sweeps where you combine 2D hand drawings with 3D backgrounds completely seamlessly. It's something that these directors, Gary Truesdale and Kirk Weiss, who also directed Hunchback of Notre Dame and Atlantis, really took advantage of. They knew how to make the simplest camera movements or the biggest camera movements add everything to a scene, especially the ballroom sequence in this movie. The CG mostly holds up. There are a couple images where you can tell it's CG, but it really doesn't matter because everything else about it is great. And the camera movements really just show you how beautifully colorful the ballroom is. And the fact that you get all these wide shots and close-ups in the exact same take of Belle and the Beast dancing, it just has this huge cinematic feel to it. And the name of this animation software was called the Computer Animation Production System. It was something that, again, they started off with Rescuers Down Under. Not a ton of people saw the movie, mostly because they pulled advertising after it had a crappy opening, but that's a subject for a different video. But this was the first movie where audiences really noticed these techniques that could be accomplished with this software. And audiences were completely convinced that this was old school animation. And even though it wasn't, it still effortlessly has that look to it. And it's the reason that Disney didn't talk about this system until '94 after The Lion King, because you had such a huge hit, it felt like there was no reason to keep the secret any longer. It was new technology that felt old school and could still make movies have an old school feel to it. You can make an animated movie just as bright and colorful as anything on celluloid without sacrificing any of the hard work and effort that goes into it. You could have more fluid and longer takes that live action movies just can't accomplish. Now, if I had any real problem with Beauty and the Beast, it's really just the first 20 minutes have a little too much exposition when it comes to setting up Belle as a character and how the other village feels about her. And the dialogue that comes out of Gaston when he's acting overly sexist, it felt really heavy-handed, even for a Disney movie. That whole line where Belle says, "He's not the monster you are," it sounds cheesy, but it still hits close to home because it's absolutely true. I know based on the time period, you could make the argument that guys said all that stuff out loud all the time, but this is still a fictional movie. It still needs to sound natural, and it didn't always sound natural, but regardless, Beauty and the Beast is still one of the best Disney films that they've ever made. Everything from the production value of the animation, the music, the songs, the voice work, the messages about how appearances don't dictate people. It's all extremely well done, and for all those reasons, I'm going to give Beauty and the Beast a 4.5 out of 5. Guys, thanks as always for watching. If you have seen Beauty and the Beast, let me know in the comments below what you thought. I'm not even entirely sure why I said that. I mean, who the hell hasn't seen Beauty and the Beast at this point? But either way, let me know in the comments below. Be sure to stay tuned for more Disney reviews and be sure to like and subscribe. Take care.